This camera right here is the OBSBOT Tail 2, and it is no tall tale to tell you that it's probably one of the most popular and hyped up cameras, at least in the past year, when it comes to these like high-end PTZ, in this case PTZR, which we are going to talk about later. I've not seen this much excitement and enthusiasm from other people about a camera in a long time, and I have talked about it in a couple other videos. I want to do a dedicated review on this camera specifically because it's something I didn't expect. I've known there's webcams. Again, I don't know if webcam is actually even the proper term for this. There are PTZ cameras out there. This is just something that I have found to be really, really special. So kind of want to dig into how I've been using it, what I like about it, how it works, and then maybe that'll help you decide if it's something that's going to fit into your workflow in a reasonable way. OBSBOT did send the Tail 2 at no cost so I could do some testing and give some feedback on it, but I'm under no obligation to make a video, say anything, do anything. I've just been using this camera. I guess I've had it for several months now, 3 months-ish. And I have been really surprised by it because I originally thought that I was going to get it, try it out, give them some feedback, but it's just one of those things that just kind of been at like every opportunity. I'm like, oh, you know what? I could use the OBSBOT for that. Oh, I could use the OBSBOT for that too. And it's sort of found its way into like every video and stream I've done since, pretty much in some capacity. And it's also a camera like I haven't been this excited about a camera in a long time. And right there is kind of already something that I've touched on twice, which is excitement and fun. And so with all the capability, everything this camera can do, it can be a very serious camera for very serious workflows. It's a really fun camera to use and it's really enjoyable and it works well enough that I can offload a lot of, it's almost like the same feeling if you're doing like recording in 32-bit float audio, where you worry that maybe your audio's levels are going to be a little funky, but you kind of have that peace of mind knowing that your 32-bit float's going to have you covered. I kind of feel the same way with this, where it's like I can sort of offload some of my worries and some of my concerns, like is something not perfect? It'll probably take care of it. It's going to track it. It's going to focus it. It's going to look good. And I don't know, it just lets you kind of focus on the fun more than anything with this camera. I'll turn mine on here. It is a PTZR camera, so pan, tilt, zoom, and rotate. And the rotation is something that's pretty unique, which is also incredibly helpful and pretty cool. So if I switch over to the OBSBOT now, I'm just hand holding it. I do have a video about how to use this with the YOLObox Ultra, how to pair it, do all the PTZ controls and everything. That entire video is filmed with the Tail 2, so if you want to see like full video image quality, definitely check that out. I will be using clips in this video, but because I need to show you the camera, I'm not always using the camera. I'll be using my FX3 to film a lot of this, or my A7S III over here. So try to mix in footage from this camera, but because I need to show you, yeah, it doesn't always work for everything. But what I want to show you here is the R in PTZR. So right now I'm hand holding the camera, but if you notice, it still looks pretty level. And what's pretty neat is, as you can kind of see, I'm tilting the camera this way, but the image is staying level. And I can actually see the lens not moving. So internally, the lens is physically stabilized, which is pretty cool. Now, if I go like upside down, then it will tilt, but then I can actually have it upside down. It will auto flip. And now I can do the same thing here. So if you're mounting it from above, looking down, or give it a chance to flip. There we go. Or you're mounting it normally from below looking up. You have a lot of leeway for keeping the image level, which is something that's really helpful for a lot of obvious reasons. But again, in terms of offloading all the things you have to think about when you're making something, not having to worry that your camera support is perfectly level is a really nice way to go. And actually what I've been using pretty much the entire time with this, for the most part, if I need something tall, is just this very inexpensive impact light stand. And that's because the Tail 2 just has a regular 1/4-20 tripod mount on the bottom, so I can just pop this on here, and then I don't need a pan tilt head or anything on here because it's built right into the camera. It's almost like a 360 camera where you can position it roughly where you think it needs to be and then trust that it's going to be able to get the shot that you need. Just put this, roughly at the height and area that you need it to be, and you know that the camera will be able to pan, tilt, zoom, or rotate to cover the rest. If you're on a slightly uneven surface, you don't have to worry because the shot is going to still be super level. So I think I can probably show you this. If you look at the lens and I tilt it, you can see how the lens, like the parts of the lens are not really changing their orientation. It's staying totally level. It's physically moving. And another thing that physically moves within the camera is the lens itself for zooming. So it has a 12 times optical zoom, which I know, especially if you lived through the camcorder boom of the early 2000s like I did, and camcorders were advertised as having like 900 times digital zoom, 12 times doesn't sound like a lot. 12 times optical zoom is very significant. That means you can go pretty wide to very, very punched in, which is awesome for things like events or sports or just anything where you need to really frame your shot and you can't physically move the camera closer to your subject. And the fact that it's optical zoom means that you don't lose any quality because the lens is physically moving. So even though the camera itself is staying still, the lens is moving, and so you're not taking an image and trying to enhance it, which is going to always reduce quality. If you remember those camcorders that had 900 times digital zoom, it basically looked like you were looking at like a scrambled censored image by the time you got to 900 times zoom because it was so weirdly artificially digitally enhanced. Optical zoom keeps 100% of your clarity, and it can record in 4K. So those things right there are why I've been able to implement this into my workflow really well, even mixing it in with my, my Sony FX3 and stuff, because the image quality, just in terms of like 4K clarity and sharpness, is just as good. This does have a 1.4 prime lens on it that gives you a nice blurry background and stuff like that. This has a 1.8 to 3.0 lens on it, and it's also not a full frame sensor in here, so we're not going to get the exact same qualities of the image, but we still have good image quality, if that makes sense. Also, the lens on this camera is $1,400. This camera is $1,200. So the lens by itself without the camera is more expensive than the whole camera. So the fact that they can be mixed together and work really well, I think is really impressive, even if it's not one-to-one image quality. Like, you're not going to mistake this for the FX3, especially at a shot like this, but you're also not going to think that it looks bad either. And especially that optical zoom, you can do some fun stuff. So I've been able to use the OBSBOT to focus on subjects that I'm, if I'm talking about something and I need to show it in real time, I can do that here. Because of that optical zoom, I am still getting a bit of a compressed background and some cool background blur, so it actually does kind of look pretty neat. And then I can either use the phone app, the desktop app, or even just this little remote control here to adjust the shot as I need it. On my phone, if I'm monitoring on my phone, or I could do this on the desktop app as well, I can select the subject, and now the camera will just track the subject. And you can adjust, obviously, the tracking sensitivity, just like with anything else. But if I'm showing something and I need to move it, I can then have the camera track it and follow it in a way that kind of sometimes actually looks like a person is operating it. It doesn't always look super robotic. Now, if I move it too much, and sometimes I feel like it might be a little sensitive, like I don't necessarily need the camera to be moving right here, but you can adjust tracking sensitivity. You can play with focus zones. There's all kinds of stuff that I didn't even know how to use with the camera, that you can kind of dial things in, or you can just spend time kind of honing in how you use it. I know if the camera's tracking something like this, to just, not flail the thing around because it's going to make things look strange. So just kind of, I know, be sort of gentle with how I'm showing something, but I also know that if I kind of dip out a frame or I move a little bit, the camera's going to keep it in focus or keep it in frame. And that's really important because when I do use my other regular mirrorless cameras for this, what I can accidentally do sometimes is I move the thing a little much, or I kind of move it out of the frame because it's zoomed in so much, it doesn't really take a lot of motion to change everything. So knowing that I can then just track the subject, and if I move a little bit, the camera's still going to follow it, that again offloads a lot of stress, a lot of worry for my brain, and I can just trust that it's going to work, and then I can just focus on what I'm trying to communicate instead of making sure that everything is working exactly like as it should be. Something else that's quite cool with this is then you can do presets. So again, either in the phone app or on this remote, I have right now a preset set as this close-up, but I can set another preset like this, and now it can zoom out a little bit, and I can go back and forth between those. So imagine I'm doing something like, this is a cool thing that I've been playing with. It's the RGB Link Mini MX. So it is an audio mixer, a 2-channel XLR mixer, but also a 4-input video mixer. Pretty nifty. So in a video for something like this, I might want to show the full subject where you can see everything, but I also at certain points might want to zoom in where you see just specific features, and now I don't have to move the camera, I don't have to physically go change the lens, worry I've messed up focus. I can just have my presets and I can just switch between 3 different presets right here anytime that I need. So for someone like me who makes videos solo most of the time, it's kind of like having an assistant or a camera operator who takes up very little space and it is very, very quiet anytime the camera is rolling. Oh, and speaking of quiet, there is a fan in the Tail 2, which is awesome. I live in the desert, as some of you might know. This week specifically, our temperatures have been upwards of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I think that's 45, 50 degrees Celsius, something like that. Very, very hot. I've been playing with this outside quite a bit just for fun, and even just inside it gets pretty hot. And just in the months prior that I've used this camera, I've never had issues with it overheating. There are 2 big fan vents on the camera, which I'm a fan of because that just lets airflow go through. It does mean this is not a weather-resistant camera. It's not something you're going to want to mount outside in the rain and the snow and the wind and dust and everything and just let it go 24/7 because it's not an all-weather camera. It's well built. It feels pretty rugged. But it's like it feels like any other, nice mirrorless camera that you want to take care of and you don't want to abuse. Another way I've been able to use this camera a lot is sometimes in videos, but also during live streams where I, again, am doing everything by myself and sometimes I need to move a little bit. In a video like this, if I need to move and go get something that's not a big deal, I can just cut out that blank part later. But especially in something like a live stream, if I need to go get something or change something, instead of just walking off frame and then it's just an empty chair for a while, it's kind of nice, especially if I'm using a wireless mic like this. I can then use the OBSBOT and then I can go do whatever I need to do, like go grab something and then walk back over here and know that I'm going to be in the frame the whole time. And of course you can adjust tracking speed. I have it set pretty slow right now, but if I set tracking speed to really fast, now it's going to like really keep up with me kind of wherever I go. Hup, hup. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily look supernatural, or maybe it looks, I'm supernatural. If you're doing sports or something, it makes sense you would want this to be pretty fast. When you're just tracking people and stuff, I usually have it set quite slow, just so that way the camera movement doesn't like make people sick or anything. And you can adjust either in the phone app or the desktop app, you can adjust what you want your tracking framing to be. Do you want it to be wide? Do you want it to be zoomed in? Do you want it to be, a medium shot, close up, whatever? And you can still use like the zoom controls and everything while it's tracking. So right now, for example, I do have the camera tracking me. If I zoom in, it's still going to keep tracking me, even though the lens is zooming, which is pretty cool. And that's not a preset. I can just do that, live with the remote right here, or I could do it through the app. I really do like this smart remote that they have because it's very, very tactile. It's very easy to pair with up to 3 different cameras. You don't just need the one camera, and then you can do your presets, you can do PTZ, you can turn off tracking, you can start recording. It's really helpful, and it has a laser pointer. I mentioned this in the YOLO box video I did, but it has a laser pointer. So if you're using this camera for a presentation, you just need a laser pointer as well. There you go. And the internal software of the camera does work really well, especially when you do pair it with apps. This is a camera that you do need to use apps with. You could potentially get by just using the HDMI output because it does have full-size HDMI and recording to a memory card, or running it through USB or a capture card to software on your computer and monitoring it that way. But the apps unlock most of the functionality, and so there's a great desktop app that actually works very, very well, and the smartphone app also works really well too, to not only frame your shots and adjust settings, but even adjust color and just monitor everything, start, stop recording, double check that it's all working. But the camera is really, really flexible, especially once you have things set in the app. So like here's an example where I just went outside into our backyard and decided to give the camera a chance to do some wildlife videography with our wild animals who live here. And it honestly looks pretty awesome. Like this is all automatic settings, no manual adjustment to color or anything, tracking. This is just, if you took the camera out of the box, hit record and selected a subject, this is kind of what it would look like. I did end up selecting each dog as a subject separately. And so there are times where you can kind of see, like it doesn't really know which subject to keep focusing on. And so it kind of like, you can see it bouncing between them. And it seems like it ends up preferring the thing that either stays in the frame the most or takes up the frame the most. But again, there are different modes. There are different focus modes and different tracking modes. So if you're doing something where you don't want it to move as much, if you're doing something with a group of people, you can kind of adjust that and fine tune it to suit lots of different needs. And that really is kind of the goal of this camera, is to suit so many different workflows. And I think it does it really well. So for someone like me who's, a solo home creator, it works great. It's like having someone help me make my videos sometimes. But obviously you can take this and you can translate it to events, to sports, to, church services, corporate things, all kinds of stuff. It can be adapted to all of those different workflows. And the fact that you don't need someone physically at the camera really does help a lot. I've talked about in other videos when I was a high school digital media teacher, we used to do a lot of event live streaming. So we do stuff on campus, games, rallies, graduations, all that kind of stuff, but we'd also do stuff out in the community and other like events for other organizations. And those were really fun to do and so much work to set up, so much work to produce. I needed a crew of, many students to make it all work. It took hours to set up, hours to tear down. And if I were still doing that now, having something like a YOLO box and several of these cameras, which also does have built-in NDI functionality, so that means you can just do it wirelessly. That's what that whole video is all about. You do have to pay for the NDI license for each camera that you have. So that means you pay once, you unlock NDI functionality, and then you can wirelessly transmit your signal to something like a YOLO box or a computer or whatever. And speaking of computers, there is some extra functionality you can get depending on what you're using the Tail 2 with. For example, if I use it with Ecamm Live, there is this really cool little light right here on the gimbal arm of the camera, and that is a tally lamp that will turn on whenever this camera is selected in Ecamm. So whether you're mixing it with other cameras or using it with just other Tail 2s, you will always be able to tell which camera is the active camera because of the tally lamp. I've always really liked camcorders for event production because they are flexible with the zoom and all that kind of stuff. And I still think that that's a great workflow in some cases, but you do need someone monitoring the camera most of the time. Otherwise you end up with a static shot that oftentimes doesn't look as good as it possibly could. These you can just set up in different places. Nobody has to be physically monitoring the camera, and then you can be somewhere else at your switcher, at your computer, whatever, remotely adjusting your shot, framing things, tracking things. You can have all the cameras tracking different subjects independently, and you can be the one person who's operating it all. So it's gonna look like you have a 4-person camera crew or a technical director and 4 camera operators, and it's just you with a computer and a little remote control or an app or something. And you don't have to just use only Tail 2s or cameras like this in your workflow. You can mix and match like I do here, even in events and stuff. So maybe you only have one PTZ camera that's tracking and doing stuff while your other cameras are set up in different areas. But again, remembering too that you can mount this upside down or right side up or even to the side. You have so much flexibility with where you position this that especially in those situations where it's not practical to run a bunch of cables or you can't fit a full tripod in a big camera with a person also operating it, this kind of opens up a lot of flexibility and still looks really good while doing it. Now I know I said it's not totally fair to do a one-to-one comparison, but if you're just wondering how the Tail 2 looks compared to the Sony FX3, I put them sort of side by side. You can see I have sorry for the frame obstruction in this, but you can at least see image quality. You're not going to get the shallow depth of field that you're getting with the 1.4 lens here, but in terms of clarity, overall image quality, this still looks quite good. Of course, then I can still track it. I can turn it on here, or it does have the gestures. You can hold up your hand to start and stop tracking. You can also hold up your hand to do zoom and all this other stuff, which the only gesture I have turned on is the hand tracking one. So I can hold up my hand and now it will track me. There's a light on the front of the camera that turns blue or turns blue when it's tracking, turns green when it's not tracking. And then it's also flashing right now because the camera is recording internally to the SD card. And that works really well. I do talk with my hands a lot though. So sometimes if I hold my hand up, I will then either activate or deactivate the tracking. If you're in a situation like that, you might want to just turn off all the gestures and manually activate tracking if you need to. That's just something to be aware of. I just talk with my hands a lot, and sometimes, especially the zoom, I was activating that all the time. So I had to turn the zoom off and then just go with the tracking here. So I think this image quality looks great. The one thing that I will say I think there's room for improvement on is in either app, you can go in and adjust the your image quality and your sharpness and your contrast and your exposure and all that stuff. And there is a white balance option and there is a tint option. Right now, I think I'm actually in auto white balance because I have found that overall, especially in here, that kind of does work the best. But if I go to custom white balance, I can match this to the color temperature that I want, but I don't know if you notice it goes really pink, like compared to the Sony camera over here to the OBSBOT over here. Sony cameras, which is what I use for my main cameras, tend to lean a little more green in their image, whereas like Canon cameras Oh, I just turned tracking off. Whereas Canon cameras lean a little more magenta, so it might be easier to match with Canon. I just feel like this looks very, very pink. If I go to auto, things work well. Now, the thing that does get a little bit tricky is there is a hue option, but not a tint option. So the hue option right now, I can play with this and try to make things match. Like if it's looking a little too magenta, I can try to tilt it more towards green. But if you look in the background, it then changes the color of everything because that's what the hue setting does. So I don't want to make it where like the color temperature overall looks right, but if you're switching between cameras, now like the blue wall in the background is different shades of blue. I want them to match as much as possible. And unfortunately, there is not currently a tint option. Oftentimes in, editing software or even some camera software, you can adjust the tint from magenta to green, and it's a little bit different than hue. And if this had a tint option, then I could just tone down those magenta things. I get the exact white balance that I want and the exact tint that I want. I bring that up because I feel like that's something that could potentially be added in a firmware update. And that would just be, I think that would make it so much easier to use this camera, to mix it in with different cameras and different workflows. But barring that, I have found that auto white balance, which is now what I'm using right here, tends to look pretty good, tends to work pretty good, especially if you're not in like a situation where clouds are coming and going and your color temperature is changing all the time or something. If you're in a relatively stable or controlled environment, auto white balance seems to work pretty good. In editing, I can kind of bring these cameras together to make them match a little bit better. And in live streaming, then I can use software like Ecamm or whatever to adjust the picture settings so that they match a little bit better. So you can still get them to match. I've been doing it just fine. But just straight out of the camera, I've noticed that when I do custom white balance, it leans very magenta, and I sometimes have a difficult time correcting that in camera. Now, one thing that the giant sensors of my full-frame mirrorless cameras can do really well is record in low light. They're just great low light cameras. This has a 1/1.5" sensor, which can go up to 4K 60, but I have found the low light performance to be really impressive, and even in situations where I've used it to like stream to Discord when like I'm playing games with friends and stuff, and I have basically no lights on in here, it still looks clear and looks bright just on like from the light from my computer display. It's kind of crazy. I even took this a while ago and just put it in front of my drum set, which is in the corner of a bedroom in the worst lighting conditions imaginable. Basically, it's super dim lighting and there's horrible backlight. And I did set it to track me, which probably wasn't super necessary here, but it was able to kind of keep me tracked, and the image does not look super noisy. The lighting here, like camera can't work miracles and make bad lighting good lighting, but this is an atrocious situation for a camera to try to do anything with. And it still did a great job. And all I did, again, just set the light stand there, hit record, I was good to go. Now, one thing that is lacking that is a little bit strange is there is no built-in microphone in the Tail 2, which kind of surprised me because I know the built-in microphones aren't always great, but small webcams, like this is the Tiny 2, which I did laugh because it just looks like, I don't know, like an enhanced version of this. It's one of those like, don't talk to me or my son ever again. This has a built-in microphone and it's, a fraction of the cost. So I was surprised there's nothing built in here. Not that it would be the best quality, and I kind of get it because of where the camera would often be placed in events and things. You might not need the audio from it all the time, but even just to use as like scratch audio or environmental audio or just for syncing things up, I kind of think that having a little built-in microphone would be nice, but it does have a 3.5mm line in and a 3.5mm microphone input. So you can connect anything that has 3.5mm directly in here, and then you can adjust your audio settings through the apps. So even for those drum clips that I did, I actually just took the Rode Wireless Micro and just plugged in the receiver here, and then just set the little transmitter down next to the camera. Not exactly how you would normally want to mic up drums, but at least I could record audio that way. So if you want to use audio with here, you do need to connect an external microphone, but fortunately it gives you the option to use all kinds of different external microphones. And it does also have tons of I/O. So you have your audio inputs, you have full-size HDMI, 3G SDI, you've got Ethernet, USB, high-speed USB to use it as a webcam, and then you also have power for USB as well. And there is something also I haven't used here, which is the RS-232 in and out, which is a different way to connect this camera to controllers or even other cameras, so you can connect a bunch of cameras to a single controller, or basically if you want to control this with a remote, if you want to control it with an app, or if you want to connect it to something else using RS-232, you can do that as well. This is something I haven't seen on any of my other cameras at all. So that is pretty cool. Again, lots of flexibility for lots of different workflows. And if you notice, even though there is that USB input for power, the whole time I've been using it in this video, it has not been plugged in. So it does have a built-in internal battery that can last up to 5 hours. Of course, that kind of depends what you're doing, the features you're using, but about a 5-hour battery life, which is super cool. And you can also stream directly from this camera, which is extremely awesome. And something really nice that not every PTZ camera does, when it's not tracking and it's on, I can just move it and frame it that way. This is something, for some reason, a lot of cameras, they get real weird if you try to physically move the gimbal and like you have to be in tracking or you have to use the controller. This one, if you have it somewhere and it's not tracking and you just want to reposition it, you can just do that manually. You don't need anything else. So hopefully by now you can see all the different ways that the Tail 2 can be used in all kinds of different workflows, and why I and so many people are excited about this camera, and why even though it does have a pretty high price, you kind of get a lot for that price, and it can do a lot of things that might replace either more expensive or different or outdated parts of your current setup to kind of give you more flexibility and more capability. Something I didn't want to do, and it's kind of hard doing reviews, is you want to provide as much information as possible, but I don't want to just go down a spec list. So I know I didn't cover every single thing the camera can do, every single scenario you might want to use the camera for, but you know, like, you're capable of going to the OBSBOT website and looking at specs. Like, I don't think there's any shortage of that information out there. I really wanted to kind of share from my perspective, especially as somebody who has done a lot of event streaming in the past, kind of introducing myself now to the world of modern PTZ and PTZR cameras like this, just how cool this is and the different ways that you can use it. Whether you're someone like me who primarily does just, you know, solo home creator stuff now, or you are part of a bigger crew and you do events or kind of anything else. I don't know, I guess you could use a vlogging camera. Probably not what it's intended for, but hey, if it's the only camera you got, you could do all kinds of stuff with this. And that is something that I've really been having fun with. Is it's sort of just always been here. I've been making sure not to like put it away because it's just out on the desk, and then I think like, oh, I could try this with that camera. I could do this. I could use that. Like, could I do this? That's kind of how I felt when I was a kid and I had my camcorder and I would think like, oh, could I connect it to this? Could I do this? Could I get that kind of shot? And I would go experiment and have fun. That's what I've been doing with the Tail 2 a lot. And I haven't had that kind of fun with the camera in a really long time. And it's made me really, really enjoy this. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. If you do want to know more about how to use the camera specifically with the YOLObox Ultra and how to set up PTZ control and all that, I do have that specific dedicated video right here. And if you are curious about maybe you don't have the $1,200 budget right now, but you're interested in something like a smaller PTZ camera, I do have a dedicated Tiny 2 review, which it's a tiny camera with big capabilities. Not very bigger capabilities than my capability of ending this video smoothly.